but even before that, his usage was sort of inconsistent. They have the receivers on the talented receivers on the perimeter. And of course, you've got the quarterback to make it all work. And you've got Hackett, who's an offensive minded guy who was supposed to kind of bring it all together. And, I visited with them in training camp. It seemed like things were going off to a really smooth start. Everybody was on the same page. And right now the results just aren't lining up with that.
Jeff Howe from The Athletic is with us here on Cattles Ramie, Sactown Sports. The Dan Snyder situation is getting messier by the day, Jeff. Earlier today, Jim Irsay came out and said, he believes Snyder should be gone. We had the ESPN story come out a few days ago about Snyder trying to get dirt on some of the owners and Commissioner Goodell. Can the NFL end up doing anything about this? Do you think they're going to do anything about Dan Snyder?
Well, I think if Jim Irsay's sentiment rings true with enough people, whether or not they're going to say it on the record or whatever, if you can get a movement to a vote where you can get, I believe I have this right. If you can bring up the vote and you can get 24 out of 32, or I guess 24 out of 31 to vote him out, then you've got enough. And it's hard not to look at the body of evidence of the body of work and to say that Dan Snyder is largely unfit to be an owner if all of these accusations and all of the everything lining up against him is ultimately true. I think we can see where this could end up coming to a resolution.
Speaking of things falling apart, we've seen in Carolina, they already traded off Robbie Anderson. How extensive do you expect the fire sale to be? Are we looking at a Christian McCaffrey move in the works?
They don't want to trade Christian McCaffrey. The Anderson trade you could see that coming even before the sideline blow up. That was one of those guys that they would have gladly moved, I think, even before firing Matt Rule. But in terms of McCaffrey, that's just a different type of stratosphere. They don't want to trade him. They're certainly not actively calling around to try to trade him. But you look at Scott Fitterer's track record, he's an aggressive GM. So if somebody's going to call and they want to bring up the discussion, he owes it to his team and especially their quest to find a quarterback to listen, to see. You look at those top three quarterbacks in next year's draft. If they don't end up with, if all of a sudden they win 2 or 3 games down the stretch here, and then you end up out of the top 5, you're going to run out of chances to draft one of those top 3 guys. So if you can somehow get that ammunition to help you trade up or whatever, to just give yourself as many picks as you can at a quarterback in next year's class as possible, then you owe it to your organization to listen to those talks. It's just, is somebody really going to come through with a first-round pick for a running back who has more of an injury history over the last several years? This is a running back who they restricted his workload in training camp in the preseason to make sure that he could be as healthy as possible through the regular season. That should have teams on alert, but it's part of it is, you want to kind of recalibrate the books for whoever comes in next year, but more than anything, you've got to start figuring out what type of draft capital he might be worth in the next 2 weeks. And if somebody is willing to bowl you over, I think you owe it to yourself to make that move.
Jeff Howe from The Athletic with us here. All guests come to you from the Folsom Lake Honda Hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop. Jeff, 49ers fans are looking at this division. Obviously, Niners not off to a great start with all of the injuries, but the Rams, man, they lose their starting left tackle, Joe Noteboom, this past weekend. How much trouble are the defending world champions?
They're in a pretty good amount of trouble. Their offensive line, when your offensive line is playing this poorly, that doesn't often self-correct. So now you've got to figure out other ways to go about it. The running game isn't anywhere near where it usually is for a McVay team. And now you throw the Cam Akers situation into it, and there's a very likely chance that he's played his last down for the Rams as they're looking to trade him. Now all of a sudden your backfield isn't as talented as you probably would have liked it to be going into the season 6 weeks ago. That's what, you could look at the Rams. That's a team that, they're willing to trade for anybody. They probably have like a 2047 first-round pick still somewhere in a janitor's closet they could try to offer to Carolina for McCaffrey. But yeah, they're average on offense, and then defensively they're making some uncharacteristic mistakes too. And if their defense, I think, was able to be a top 5 unit, then you could buy some time for your offense. But right now, it's surprising to see how average they are on that side of the ball.
How much activity do you expect around the NFL at the trade deadline in a couple of weeks?
It seems like this could be a better one than we've seen. I mean, you've got McCaffrey's going to be that big name. And right now, I'd still be mildly surprised if he were traded. But again, Cam Akers is a guy who has shown to have a ton of talent when he's been healthy. You could look at potential movers, maybe Cleveland, Arizona, some names in Carolina. Like I would rule out Brian Burns and DJ Moore and guys like that. But, there could be some teams that have maybe not reached expectations to this point who might be willing to give off some pieces. And again, spin it forward. Look at that quarterback class. You've got Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Will Levis as the top three on a lot of teams' lists right now. And if you've got a team that knows, if they can be frank with themselves, they know that they're not going to make the playoffs, you got to start considering putting yourself in position to go after one of those guys. I mean, shoot, even include Will Anderson. If you have a quarterback, like that's a guy worth getting in the top 5 for. So, yeah, I mean, I could see this being a more active deadline than we've seen in the last couple.
Last one for you today, Jeff. A lot of talk about Kyle Shanahan after what happened on Sunday, the 8-minute fourth quarter drive that resulted in 0 points, the 0-26 record going into a fourth quarter down by 4 points or more. Just your general feel about how Kyle is looked at throughout the league, and is he considered one of the very best coaches in the NFL?
I mean, he's very highly respected, and he's got obviously a unique system. I think looking at McDaniel's success in Miami, coming from that system, is going to aid that respect. But this is a team that has struggled. The injuries are a major factor. I think Garoppolo coming in without having an offseason was a reason for some of that early rust. And then, I thought Garoppolo played all right on Sunday. There were some penalties. There were a couple big drops, maybe more than a couple big drops. He just didn't get enough help around him. So when you were dealing with with that big of an injury factor, your margin for error is a whole lot lower. And, I think at some point, if they can get Deebo more consistently involved, same with Kittle, offensively, they're probably going to be in a better spot. But I think the long-term success of this team right now really hinges on getting the defensive core back and healthy for the stretch run. But look, with the Rams struggles that we've seen and, kind of the surprisingly imperfect nature of the NFC West, it wouldn't shock me if it takes like 10 wins to win that division this year.
Yeah, it's not looking good in that division at all. Jeff Howe from The Athletic. Jeff, thanks for the time, man. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.